Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, and I am way too excited about the article that came out today on Daily MTG. It's written by, of course, Mark Rosewater because it has to do with these storm scales. So he's looking back at Kaladesh and Amonkhet to put all of their mechanics on the storm scale. Now, if you're not familiar, I'll breeze over it real quick. I have an entire video on it. But it's a scale from 1 to, I'll say 10, but there is 111 on the list. And it indicates the likelihood that a mechanic will return to the game at some point. So level 1 is pretty much a given. It probably won't even just be in the next set, it'll probably be in every set. That includes things like flying, indestructible, death touch, scry, things typically called evergreen keywords or evergreen abilities that they just keep coming back over and over and over. And honestly, 2 and 3 aren't that far off. His definition of 2 is we will definitely see it again, but not necessarily right away. In level 3, we will most likely see it again, probably many times throughout the next, couple years, but far from in every set. And then 7 is where it gets pretty nuts. It's unlikely to return, but if it just happens to be the exact perfect thing for a certain environment, they will bring it back, otherwise they won't. That's stuff like Retrace, Split Second, Snow Mana, or Snow Lands. Yeah, not exactly priority. And then 8, 9, and 10 are just, it's not going to happen. And of course, number 10, Storm and Dredge. Now, quite a few of the mechanics 7 and up were invented and developed by Mark Rosewater, but he also made the Storm Scale and put those mechanics on it. So, is he able to identify something as toxic, horrible for the game and a terrible idea, or is he not? The world may never know. By the way, banding is a 10, and then an 11 is bands with other. How does banding work? Nobody knows. Absolutely nobody. Nobody living on Earth knows how that mechanic works. Do not try to explain it down in the comments section. I will reply to you with 50 more questions. What about lifelink? What about this? What about that? What about unblockable? What if only one of them's unblockable? What if they're flying? What if only one of them's flying? What about trample? What if they all get trample? What if you add trample later? What if you respond to their blocking assignment with trample? Just don't even bother. Just don't. Nobody knows how the mechanic works, okay? Nobody. It's an 11. Deal with it. So he uses 5 criteria to determine where to put mechanics, and it's popularity, basically how well was it received, did people play it, that kind of stuff. Then design space, how many more cards could they design with this mechanic? And if you think about it, yeah, that would affect its likelihood of coming back. At the end of the day, they have to have cards to put it on. Then we've got versatility. How well does the mechanic mix and match with other mechanics, and does it require a lot of infrastructure, or does it require minimal support? So is it basically standalone? Does it make a horrible matchup with another one of the mechanics in the set? Or I should say in a set, just in a general set. Then development, how easy is this mechanic to cost? How easy is it to balance? In other words, like play testing, can they realistically easily get it on a card without it being just utterly broken? I assume in there is what's the likelihood of making a drastic mistake, so I'm going to say flickering things that don't have a type specification. Probably a 10 on the scale because of Felidar Sovereign being able to flicker planeswalkers. Whoopsies. A hostage taker being able to target itself. I have a feeling they're never going to do that again, but then again, since they almost did it back to back, I have a feeling they are going to do it again. And then playability. Did players have problems understanding this mechanic? Banding! Both in how it worked and in how it interacted with other mechanics. Was the mechanic logistically hard to use? And there are some real gems in that list that would be a no. There are some that just nobody understood, everybody played wrong right off the bat, and they probably wouldn't bring them back for that reason. They might make a simplified version or a more direct version, which they have done that in the past, actually. But yeah, some of them were just downright confusing the way they read. The most recent example I can think of is protection from colors. Whether it can be blocked or targeted or take damage, and what about untargeted stuff, but then what is the color of the source and what if it's mixed color? I mean, there's just so many rules, they're just not going to bring it back, they said. So that explains the basis of his decisions for what we're about to read, which is the Kaladesh and Amonkhet block, because remember they had 2 set blocks back then, mechanics. So number 1, colored artifacts, which by the way were in Future Sight, Shadowmoor, Shards of Lara, New Phyrexia, Theros, and Kaladesh. Because, Whip of Erebos, Reaper King, Godsend, and Theros. Hell yeah, love that card. The popularity was popular. It wasn't very popular, it was popular. I should have named what his levels are, but whatever. Design space, large. I mean, you just throw it out there, duh. Versatility, flexible. I mean, you could have 1, you could have 10, just whatever. Development, not problematic at all, just because its color doesn't mean anything. Ooh, color identity for commander, who cares? And playability, absolutely no playability affected. People know how to pay colors for spells. And the storm scale rating is 2, which that actually kind of surprises me. But I mean, if you look at the 5 categories, yeah, it worked well. People liked it. And I would say the only way to do powerful artifacts is to color lock them. If they're any color, anybody can run them, which was the problem with Smuggler's Copter. It was the problem with, to an extent, Marvel. Aetherworks Marvel, by the way. They had to ban both of those in case you weren't paying attention. There are a lot of really broken, obnoxious cards. Even like Thran Temporal Gateway, I still think that's really pushing it. The stars really have to align to play that thing, but I just hate free casting. You guys know this. But if you look at the Gear Hulks, my god, could you imagine those 5 Gear Hulks and just colorless, and you could throw them into any deck? That would be insane. So what they do by making it like a creature and an artifact, that's usually the typical use of this, although Whip of Erebos was a black legendary enchantment artifact, is they're adding an additional weakness. You can use a destroy creature effect or a destroy artifact effect, and then because it's color locked and because of those 2 get rid of it options, which is wider than just an artifact or just a creature alone, you can really jack up the power. Like Verdurous Gearhulk, that card was nuts. So honestly, I would have almost put it at 3 just based on feeling, but I mean, I guess on his actual scale, yeah, it would land at a 2. So next up, energy. Oh, people wanted Mark Rosewater's head on a spike for this. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Energy wasn't the problem. I think it's one of the best mechanics, like an idea for a mechanic ever. It's mana that you can store up and use between turns. They've actually done mana that you can store between phases before. I think maybe between turns, maybe. I can't think of any examples unless you count Icy Cauldron, and that one's a little bit of a stretch. Well, maybe lands that you add counters on. When I saw it, I'm like, this is it. This is amazing. I love this. The problem was allowing too many sets to be legal, and because of that, too many dynamic cards, too many cards in the sideboard, but also just very directly because of that, too much access to color fixing. People should never be able to play 4-color energy and be that consistent. It's ridiculous. And if you look at what they banned from that deck, it was the color fixing, not the mechanic, that was the problem. Always has been, always was. And obviously Aetherworks Marvel, duh, casting crap for free is broken. Imagine that. I'm shocked. But also keep in mind, people would always free cast the Eldrazi. Those were supposed to have cycled out by then. Once again, Emrakul was not the problem, but that set was supposed to be gone. Those 2 things, access to color fixing and too many answers, too many good cards because those decks would just run best of in every color, that was the problem. So that said, I have not even read this yet. Let's see what he says about it. I think this will maybe make it to like a 6. Maybe. So popularity, very popular. Now see, that's where he's wrong. Yes, very popular in that people at tournaments played it. I guess people like played different versions of it. There was a high variety and people played it at F&M, but people also really hated it. So to give it the highest rating of very popular when the level of hate was super real about energy and people wished it would never have been a thing, I don't know if you can still say very popular. I mean, if you're going with the narrowest definition, design space large. I mean, energy is an alternate resource. You can throw it on absolutely anything. You can add it to any card. You can make it abilities. I mean, duh. Versatility rigid, though. He wrote, energy requires an environment built around it. It would be hard, for instance, to put energy on just 1 card in the set. That's true. They had to throw it on, I think, all 5 colors, if I'm not mistaken, plus some colorless. He goes on to say, there is a world where energy is just how we do charge counters, which would allow us to do a smaller number of them, but that would have giant play design ramifications. I don't know what that sentence means, but I assume what he means is we've done this in the past with charge counters, time counters, counters on lands that generate more mana and then they all blow off. It's easier to do that than it is to add energy because then you need like 50 energy cards to make it worth playing. Otherwise the, as they call it, card support wouldn't be there. And then development, problematic. I'll just quote Ian Duke, the person who runs the play design team. Energy is parasitic, meaning it really only works well with itself, and the more you have in your deck, the better it is. This creates a knife's edge balance problem. That's true, you're either all in or you're not, and the more you add, the better it works. So it just boiled down to 1 or 2 decks, and that was that. So either energy is strong enough to show up or it isn't. That is brilliant. Ian knows what he's talking about on this. Of course, we don't want a new splashy mechanic not to be viable, so we try to position it to be strong enough. If energy turns out to slightly stronger than we intend, it runs the risk of showing up too much and pushing out other non-energy cards and strategies. Absolutely true. You either play it or you don't, and it was almost unplayable in mono, and wow, the development of it was that problematic. I didn't even realize that. Playability equals playability affected. Energy uses a brand new counter and requires the player to track how much they have of it and their opponent's energy strategically. It's definitely an above average mechanic in terms of the amount of focus needed to play with it. Just slap down some cards or use dice. I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, it adds a new thing and almost like a new zone, kind of. Not really. I mean, the player, and then you place the counters on the player, so the player always has been a zone, I think, officially or unofficially. I don't know, I think the player isn't a permanent or a zone. They're just the player, but they're basically a zone. Anyway. Oh, I nailed it! Storm scale rating 6. I knew it. Like, not impossible, but I don't think it would be a priority. I knew it. I've got a feeling for this. I have studied the crap out of the Storm scale. So overall, his summary is energy was pretty popular, has a lot of design space, and is flavorful. It would be much lower in number on the Storm scale if the play design issues weren't so large. I love how he didn't mention that they had to ban the crap out of it. It broke standard, and it drove probably 10% of the customers away, bare minimum. Now, call me crazy. This is a really out there idea. But maybe that should be a consideration, that it made customers go away and stop playing your game and stop spending money. Maybe you should think about that before you think about how hard was this on playtesting and our development team. Who gives a crap about them if the customers are walking away? That is priority number 1. Nowhere in here did he mention the banning at all. Unbelievable. So then he says he was waffling between a 6 and a 7, and because he's a big fan of the mechanic, ooh, shocker, he gave it a 6. Sounds like by that statement, literally everybody else at Wizards gave it a 7, so we're never going to see it again. So next up, Fabricate. If you don't remember, it's like Fabricate 2. When this creature enters the battlefield, either put 2 1/1 counters on it or create 2 servos. I liked it. I thought it was dynamic, it was interesting, and it added choice to the game. They wanted to add choice. When they did the modal spells, especially in, what was that? That awful block, Tarkir. They said the reason behind it was they wanted less card draw luck, less deck building skill, and more making the right decision based on what you see. So they wanted more player decisions where you either make the right decision or you don't based on calculations, predictions, and knowledge and gameplay and knowledge of decks and all that. So Fabricate was just a simple, do I need more creatures or do I need one big creature? How much control are they running? And it required some skill to play. I absolutely loved it. I'm going to say this could almost be a 3. That would be my guess. Depends, though. So, popularity, popular. This mechanic was more liked than loved, but very few actively disliked it. Well, I got the impression from the energy section that that wasn't a consideration. Well, I guess it suddenly is. What do you know? So he says it's definitely what R&D calls a workhorse mechanic in that it's not splashy but very functional. I mean, yeah, it felt like it was always in the game. That makes sense. Design space, small. When we first created this mechanic, we thought that it was going to have a lot of design space, but we learned that costing the mechanic such that it's an interesting decision was difficult. So they had to limit it to very few cards, actually. So as not to make a mistake, they're implying, I guess. Versatility, neutral. The mechanic can work in a vacuum, but it really should have something to do with +1 counters, or some creature token synergy, or like artifact count or something. So it can stand alone, but it probably shouldn't. Development, neutral, apparently. That's surprising. The 2 big issues for play design were, 1, Fabricate cards are hard to cost correctly for constructed, and 2, there's a limit to how many creature tokens a constructed environment can support. That's true. If you have too many Fabricate creatures and people put them all in a deck together, you're going to get a buttload of servos, which I kind of disagree with that. I mean, unless we're talking about digital, but I've seen like 50 tokens stack up, and you just start using dice at a certain point if the like actual physical paper version is getting too bulky. And then, oh, it's just an unstoppable flood. Okay, cool. Well, mass kill. I mean, there's like 3 colors that can do that. Like blue and green can't necessarily just kill or remove a ton of creatures. Blue sometimes can do mass removal, but red, white, and black certainly can. So yeah, I mean, fear the sideboard if you're going to lean on Servo Flood. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if I agree with them saying, oh, you got to limit how many creature tokens can be generated. I mean, to an extent, yeah, but it's not like people can't do something about it. He could be referring to a passive boost, though, where you name, like, artifact, or what you name servo, and then boom, oh, they all get +1/+1. Whoopsies. That in coordination with having too many, or death triggers, where you get to, like, draw a card on creature death or something. Yeah, that gets wild. But they almost always say non-token creature if they fear that. I'm still on the fence about that assessment. So, playability. Playability was affected. This mechanic requires playing with both +1/+1 counters and creature tokens. Oh, no! I mean, you could name some decks that don't use counters and creature tokens, but my god, I think people are used to it at this point. Do they really think that's too complicated for a new person? They're like, oh, how do I create a token? Oh, here, you use a blank. Grab it out of your deck box. Here, have some. Done. How do I put a counter on it? You put something on it that represents a counter, usually a die. Done. Wow, that's the most complicated part of Magic ever. What the hell? He gave it a 6! The same as Energy. Fabricate was freaking awesome. What the hell? I guess what they usually mean is literally Fabricate, not, oh, this version brings out goblins. This version brings out saplings. I think they mean literally Fabricate, bringing out servos. So, wow. I mean, at most, I'd give it a 4. If it was just, oh, something functionally similar but named differently, which would be a different entry in the Storm Scale, that's how that works, like Fear and Intimidate, I would absolutely think it would come in at 3, so that 6 rating is shocking to me. Next up, vehicles. Now, most people hated this, I'll be perfectly honest. It was a little complicated. The pros were extremely confused about when you can and can't crew something and when it's too late to crew something. Huge tournament-affecting mistakes were made at the highest level. Everybody pretty much universally hated this. And your battlefield just turned into an impound lot of just dead vehicles if they took out all of your individual crewing creatures, so they only needed to destroy half your creatures to make all of them useless, and then the crewing creatures are now, you take like 1, 2, 3 creatures, tap them all, put all your eggs in one basket, and cross your fingers and hope nothing happens to the vehicle. Idiotic. I hated almost everything about this stupid mechanic, and to top it off, some of the vehicles were completely overpowered. So popularity. Popular. Vehicles were pretty well liked when they premiered and continue to have many fans. No, they don't. I would say more than 50% of people hated it. The fact that it's already been in multiple sets, I guarantee they got this thing at like a 4, but god, they gotta take in community opinion of it. All of a sudden, people's feelings about the mechanic and the people who disliked it are no longer a factor in this case. I guess they're only a factor for Fabricate and not Energy or vehicles. Interesting. So design space, medium. The biggest issue with design space is that a lot of vehicle designs will look alike, so any one set can't have too many of them. Luckily, they work best in smaller number, as any one deck doesn't want too many vehicles. Yeah, because it'll be impossible to crew them. The versatility is flexible. The only thing vehicles require is a substantial amount of creatures, except for the ones that auto-crew and have crew abilities, which were the most popular, Heart of Kiran. And as the average Magic set is over 50% creatures, we're good to go. Development, problematic. Once again, quoting Ian Duke, colorless vehicles in particular are tricky to balance because if they are generally strong, they'll end up in every deck. See? He gets it. I literally just said that about artifacts in general that are colorless. So we need to find designs that make sense in certain decks but not others. Vehicles are naturally better at attacking than blocking, obviously, which can push towards snowball gameplay. Yeah, where you just go. You just hit the gas pedal and just run them over. Vehicles are at their most effective against control decks with sweepers and sorcery speed removal, so having too many strong vehicles can push out those strategies. Oh, because they've perpetually cared about pushing out 90% of the mechanics and deck archetypes in favor of some broken crap. Yeah, that's how they run in Managed Standard. Playability affected. Vehicles are a little on the complicated side, really, when even the pros can't figure out what the hell's going on and have to call over a judge to ask why they can't crew something in the middle of a blocking assignment. Which is why we've started only using them at uncommon or higher, okay? They're super flavorful, though. Nobody cares. And that helps a little with getting the essence of how they work. Storm Scale rating 2? A 2? 2. Okay, let me read what 2 is. We'll definitely see again, but not right away. Well, I guess that holds up with the sets that came out afterwards. So, vehicles are deciduous, he says, which is the opposite of evergreen, which means you see them, they're in the game, but you won't see them in every set. So they get a rating of 2. Wow, I thought deciduous extends to... Well, I guess 2 by the name, but I mean, come on, it's only 1 higher than 1. Anyway, I do think that you'll see us experiment with colored vehicles. See, I was just going to say that, as that solves some of the issues that Ian was raising. What do you guys think? You want vehicles to come back? I certainly don't. Next up, Improvise. God, I love Improvise. Improvise was some crazy crap. I did a black, I don't remember the cutesy nickname, but a black Improvise deck. It was like Ramp, Battle at the Bridge, Herald of Anguish. Oh my god, that deck was insane! The popularity was popular, of course. Players liked Convoke, so it's no surprise that Improvise, which apparently was called Artifact Convoke, and that's what everybody called it when they first saw it, early on in development, is also popular, although not quite as popular. Yeah, because it's narrower, so what? Convoke is just annoying and can be broken. Improvise was way easier because you just count the number of artifacts and test those decks and see if anything's broken. Design Space Medium, technically just about any spell effect can be given Improvise, true, but in order for it to have an impact, the spell tends to want a cost that's a little bit higher, so reducing its cost means something. That was my issue with it. You'd find like something that should cost 5 and they make it cost 8, oh, but it has Improvise. And that's just to balance it out because they know it could be cast for like 0 or close to it, and that's a problem. That was what was wrong with it. So, boy, where do I think they're going to put it? I don't know. They've been so damn unpredictable, I might as well just split the difference and say 5, I guess. Maybe 4? It feels like a 5 to me. Let's see. So, Versatility, rigid, really? This mechanic requires a strong artifact infrastructure to work. I mean, yeah, I guess. Artifact themes, while developmentally dangerous, are quite popular with the players. Yeah, exactly. Well, they are developmentally dangerous because you can use them in any damn deck. That's why almost every artifact should be colored. But then what's the point of it being an artifact? It's actually just a liability at that point unless it's equipment. The development was neutral. The mechanic is safer than affinity for artifacts. My god, they better never bring that back. As the reduction cost is gated to 1 mana per artifact. Yep. The bigger problem for play design is it's a tricky mechanic to push for constructed because it requires such a specific deck to be relevant. Yeah, they don't want their mechanics to be dead on arrival, like, what was that, Journey into Nyx? By the way, this'll piss you off. Bestow, one of the best mechanics ever made in the history of the game, is a 7 on the Storm scale. That is an insult. It's the simplest, like, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, but technically you have to kill the creature twice mechanic ever, and that is amazing. It's better than you literally have to kill it twice, like Persist and Undying, and it usually costs more to bestow it on top of another thing, so you had to have more mana to do it. It was one of the fairest, best mechanics that partially played around control without just crushing it, like Hexproof from Red, which is just ridiculous. Oh, that really pisses me off that that's a 7. I'm pissed off that I even looked it up. So playability, not affected. There's a little bit of counting, but players mostly didn't have issues with the gameplay. That's true. Storm scale rating 5. Okay, hey, that's exactly what I guessed. This is a good but narrow mechanic. I believe we'll have artifact themes and sub-themes again, so I could imagine one of them might bring back Improvise. See, that's the thing. I think he knows that they'll just probably make a different, slightly tweaked variation of it. So next up, we've got Revolt. So at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent left the battlefield this turn, then do something. 1 occurrence only, end step only. So instead of the usually overpowered and broken whenever a creature dies, whenever something leaves play, whenever something enters the battlefield, and then just flicker it, this can only go off once. And that's why it was so good. Popularity, popular. I don't know what decks he was looking at, but that's just not true. He says it's, well, yeah, it was slightly more popular than Improvise, I guess. I mean, only at the tier 1 level. It had a lot of synergy with Kaladesh block, and one of the cards with the mechanic Fatal Push became a major player in numerous formats. That's because it's a little OP for specifically other formats. It wasn't even that good in Standard, to be honest. Oh, and also the big thing of it is it worked without Revolt. That's why people played it. It was still good without Revolt. In fact, probably 75% of the time when somebody played it, it was without Revolt. Oh, by the way, that was one of the other versions of Revolt, which does not check at the end step like most of them did. It checks at the time of the spell's resolution if something has already left play at that point. The end step one was like Call for Unity and a couple other cards. So there was recurring Revolt and then at resolution time Revolt, and to me they were 2 completely different mechanics. So Design Space Medium, I mean, it's similar to Morbid. Yeah, it really is actually, now that he says that. There's different ways to use it, but the kind of mechanic that you don't want too much of in one set, because then, you know, it'll either work or it won't. The whole deck collapses if you can't get something to leave play, so yeah, he's got a point there. Versatility neutral, it's the kind of mechanic that can work with any set. Creatures die in most games, but, oh wow, you're not going to mention any kind of, token that leaves play? No, we're not? Okay, we're going to ignore that. Okay, cool. But it's improvised when it's synergistic with the other mechanics in the set. I don't see us using it in a set if the other aspects of that don't up its relevance. Oh, I bet this is going to be a lot higher than I thought it was. Oh, did I even give a prediction? I'm going to say... Boy, this coming back verbatim, exactly as it is, as opposed to them just bringing back Morbid or something sort of similar, it's probably a lot higher than I think. So something really similar, probably 3 or 4, but this exactly, probably another 5. Maybe higher. It's hard to say. Let's see. So the development was neutral. Boy, he's saying popular, medium, neutral, neutral. This is probably going to be way worse than I think. Let's see. It was simple. It was similar to improvise in many ways. It's a fun mechanic that requires a lot of synergy to work well in a tournament play. Because of the need for the right balance of enablers and payoff, it can often end up being very swingy. That's true. There's a lot of Revolt cards that people just ignored because they were too unreliable. Playability effective. This mechanic takes a bit of concentration to use because it requires being extra aware of the zone changes. That's true. You have to remember what happened that entire turn. Judges reported that it needed an above average amount of judge support. Yeah, because you can't prove that something left play. They'll be like, no, that went to the graveyard last turn. Prove it. It works just fine in digital, but so does most other stuff. Storm scale rating 6. Okay, so he says, I believe that the best chance for Revolt's return is going to be a new environment that properly sets up Revolt without having too many other mechanics that require focus. Next up, Aftermath. In other words, better flashback. Oh, they better have put this 4 below. I don't even care what it is. It better be 4 or below because the flashback was crap and this was so much better than it. So flashback was the same spell effect over again. Once it's in the graveyard, you can use the ability and there you go. Same reason Rebound was obnoxious and stupid. But then Aftermath was, okay, you cast it and then you've got typically a bigger cast cost that you can do from the graveyard later. Sometimes it was off color, sometimes it wasn't. That I took issue with. I think it should always be on color. But this is the best version of Flashback I've ever seen. The whole just return it to hand and cast it later. Oh, Flashback, but it's on color or off color, and it's the same exact spell with no changes. Boring, stupid, and not very friendly to Modern, to be perfectly honest. Those sideways cards were ugly as crap, though, and you had to flip it to read it correctly, which just blatantly tells your opponent that that's what the card is. I mean, if you built the deck, you probably know what it does, but in a draft environment, it was a little rough. So popularity liked. Players generally liked the gameplay of Aftermath, but most disliked the layout of the cards. Yes, they were ugly as hell, and people thought it was a prank. I guess people disliking the mechanic at a functional level is back as a factor. Thanks for the consistency, Mark. If we ever brought it back, we'd probably explore a different frame treatment. Yeah, stop tilting it sideways, you dicks. I bet that alone put it above a 4, and I'm going to be pissed if it is. Design space small. The best Aftermath cards, that's absolutely not true, by the way, are the ones that have 2 useful effects that, if you happen to cast them on the same turn, have synergy with one another. Yeah, I mean, that was the more OP ones, and nobody had that much mana, but okay, I guess. I think it was more valuable that when you cast them different turns, it didn't completely ruin it. So having had to design some of them, if I could read today, I can tell you that it is more difficult than you might imagine. As with any split cards, there's also the desire to tie the effects to the names. Aftermath uses 2 to connect the words, unlike the old split cards that used and. That's weird because they used or originally before Fuse came out. Or at least in my opinion they should have, because, you had to choose one or the other. Versatility, flexible. Aftermath cards don't have a lot of requirements of the set they're in. They have a little synergy with the graveyard theme, and that's where I'd expect to see it again. I wouldn't rely on that. Just throw it in. Development, not problematic. Okay. Play design can handle Aftermath cards as long as they're kept in small doses. Too many graveyard value mechanics can lead to grindy games. That's true. It's kind of like having half of a card advantage. It's gone, but it's not really gone. Magic's normal momentum makes decks run out of steam over time, except for Standard right now, where you run out of cards in your library half the games, because Control is completely out of control, because Draw is out of control, because freaking Jumpstart is broken as all hell. But yeah, adding too much free added value to the environment could warp things. Yeah, you think? Playability affected. Aftermath requires you to monitor cards that are active in the graveyard for all players, which can take a significant amount of concentration, especially in high volume. That's true. Getting blindsided by this was very common at FNM. People would be like, "Oh, this is still in my graveyard, by the way," and you're like, "Oh crap, dang it, I forgot." And that always sucked because it was publicly available, visible knowledge. You just forgot. And oh my god, they gave it a 7 on the storm scale. Screw you too, you dicks. Okay, I gotta look it up. What the hell is Flashback? Hold on, I'm looking it up right now. Flashback 3! Are you kidding me? You gave Flashback a 3! Flashback is shit! Are you kidding me? This is so much better than Flashback. Who gives a crap if casting them both in the same turn gives you some whoop-de-doo turbo boost? Nobody cares. Flashback is so annoying and boring. What was one of the most hated cards, the most ban-worthy cards in recent history? Oh yeah, Torrential Gearhulk, also known as Flashback in card form, the Flashbackatron 3000. What's one of the most broken, overpowered, hated cards in Modern? Oh yeah, Snapcaster Mage, because it grants Flashback to anything you want in your graveyard. Flashback should bare minimum be an 8 on the scale. You have to make the effect cost more and do something different. That's how you have to do it. Oh, that pisses me off that they gave this a 7. So in other words, we're never going to see it again. So I hope they just make a functionally identical version that, in their opinion, is a 2 on the scale. Because that's ridiculous. Next up, cartouches and trials. Okay, this better be an 8, because you had to run both, and then you kind of didn't because the cartouches were OP and nobody ran the trials. And, fun fact, if you run 4 of and 4 of with 0 scry, 0 draw assistance, just naturally, you have less than a 10% chance of them ever meeting up in gameplay in one given game. In fact, I think it's actually below 5%, if I'm not mistaken. Even in 40-card decks and drafting at the pre-release, people couldn't get the synergy to go between trials and cartouches. So, yeah, probably an 8. Although, because they just are so clueless about this, I'm going to say Mark probably gave it about a 1. Popularity liked. The cartouche and trial cycles were designed for, more limited than constructed. Well, you can't control how many you get, so that's stupid. But they had their fans. I mean, I liked, 2 of them. I just treated them like any other aura, so I guess that you could just say auras is the mechanic then. Design space, small. Both cycles have a lot of constraints, making their design space pretty small. Yeah, there can only be 1 in each color, and then you gotta run 4 of, and then they still won't meet up. Versatility, neutral, individually, and rigid together. Told ya. I don't even need to explain that. It's just duh. Development, neutral. Auras are normally tricky to balance for construct, but the enters battlefield effect helps a lot for creating value. See, that's brilliant, but that's just in the context of auras. It wouldn't even have to be a cartouche. So if a turn later they blow up the creature, you put the aura on, now you're out 2 cards and they only use 1 card to do it in all likelihood. Oh well, that's why everybody hates auras. But you got that crazy ETB effect, so even if they did blow it up, you're like, okay, it kind of functioned as a spell. That's why I loved them. The trials could just piss off, but the cartouches were nice, but that's because they were just auras. So, blah, 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 they're boring and they were made for limited and constructed. Cool. Playability affected. The cartouches require monitoring the graveyard if you're playing the trials. That's true. You had to constantly search through the graveyard to see if they were there, and if you searched ahead of time, people knew you had one. Okay, so the rating is, I'm scrolling down. Wait, what? Oh, they actually literally did what I kind of hinted at. I'm actually a little bit surprised. So, the cartouches, or as I like to call them, auras, are a 4. That's right. Auras are a 4, or I should say, auras with an ETB effect. That makes sense. Auras are probably a 1 or 2. I mean, they're probably a 1. But auras with an ETB effect is a 4. I kind of wish it was like a 3, because that's really cool. And then the trials are a 6, which, what did they even do? Let's see, when it enters the battlefield, do something, and then, wow, it's literally just an ETB enchantment that isn't an aura. Yeah, give it a 6, I don't care. Then 8 for both together, which is exactly what I guessed. That is hilarious. Yeah, they're unplayable crap. So he says, our need for the value of auras makes the cartouches the part I see us returning to, so they obviously won't call them cartouches. Also, that's literally an Egyptian term. Well, kind of. I mean, it's not exclusively Egyptian. Anyway, the enchantment with the enters battlefield effect is something we'll do again. So like that. So in other words, a 1, but they gave it a 4. I don't really get that. But the returning element is something that requires the right environment. I don't. Oh, the returning element. In other words, the trial. I don't know why you said that. I don't see us doing both together again, barring a return to Amonkhet, and even then, probably only if the set is set in the past. Ouch. I don't care if they say get out 5 cartouches and summon Captain Planet. As long as they don't bring trials back, I don't care. Bring back cartouches. I agree with that completely. Oh, now they got cycling. So that was in Urza's Saga, that was in Onslaught, it was in Time Spiral, it was in Shards of Alara, and it was in Amonkhet. This has to be like a 2 or 3, just because they brought it back. People like it. It's, oh, look at this card I don't need. Cool, take some of the mana, ruin a little bit of my turn, lower my options, and pull a card that isn't crap. Who doesn't like that? It's intrinsically fair. Not the whole every time you cycle a card do this. That was stupid. That can just piss right off. But cycling itself, I bet they're gonna split it. But I'm gonna say cycling. Yeah, probably a 3. By their own definition of 3, I think it just has to be a 3. So popularity, very popular. Cycling is the non-evergreen mechanic that's shown up in the most different sets. That's because A, it plays great, and B, players really like it. Absolutely true. Design space large. Absolutely, you can put it on any card with 0 negative consequences. So, duh. Versatility, it's flexible. They've made the occasional Cycling Matters card, but generally speaking, any deck can just throw Cycling on a card, and you just draw it and ditch it. Absolutely. Development, not problematic at all. Cycling had a lot of knobs, numbers, and costs that can be adjusted, making it one of the easier mechanics for play design to tune. I mean, you could say that about Bestow, too, or Overload, or Monstrous, or anything. Let's see. It was the trickiest to balance in faster environments, of which Amonkhet was one. I mean, yeah, red. But see, then you just use the card and ignore the cycling part of it. Like, and then if the game really does drag on for some reason, then you use the cycling aspect. So that's not completely true. I mean, in a fast deck, I wouldn't go out of my way to run cycling, but, you know, if I happened to have a good card that had cycling, I'd use it. And they just said they could throw it on anything. Playability not affected. It's straightforward. People get it. Storm scale rating 3. Hell yeah. Nailed it. I mean, there's no reason for it to be 4, but 2, we'd see it more often already. So, I mean, that was so easy. Next up, Embalm. Now, here's the thing. It's literally an Egyptian keyword. I don't think we're going to see Embalm just because it's called Embalm. And the Storm Scale, once again, refers to the exact mechanic as named, not a functionally similar or identical version of it with a different name. So because of that, technically it should be a 7, but then again, stuff coming back from the graveyard, I mean, that's probably a 2. But Embalm was really specific. It was like a token, it was a copy, and you know printing all those variety of tokens and get your hands on them was a pain in the ass. So, they're probably going to put it at a 6, realistically. That's my guess. So popularity, very popular, absolutely. I'm just skipping through these because who cares? Design space medium. The mechanic can work on just about any vanilla, no rules text, or French vanilla creatures with just keywords. I've never heard the term in my life. But works best with creatures that have some advantage entering the battlefield twice, like an ETB effect. True. Each creature required its own creature token, complete with art, especially for it, so that puts limits on how many of any one you can put in the set. True. Dang it, Mark, I just said that. And by the way, Eternalize was just better. I'm just going to throw that out there. It was a better mechanic. I mean, it locked it into being exactly a 4/4, so that was stupid. But Embalm gave it absolutely no benefit whatsoever. And then clearly Embalm and then a number would have been better, and then it comes back with a counter or 2 on it. You know, maybe this is a 7. There's so many better ways to do it. Why would they do it again? So versatility, flexible. I mean, duh, there are synergies that you can do, but really it's just whatever. Development, neutral. The play design team didn't have too many problems with Embalm, but there's a limit to how many creatures that return from a graveyard a constructed environment can support. True, if you make everything unkillable, control just doesn't work. But that was the point, because control's the worst, so screw control. Playability was affected. Each Embalm creature had its own unique creature token. Yeah, that was a pain in the ass. Tracking which creatures in the graveyard have Embalm requires a bunch of attention from the players. Oh, and when it dies, and if you just got lazy and flipped it and didn't buy the token, you could accidentally put it back in the graveyard and cause a big dispute later, so I'll just add that one to the list. And they gave it, a 5 on Amonkhet, but an 8 on any other plane. I guess. Should I just stop guessing if he's just going to make up the rules as he goes? I mean, what did I say, 6 or 7 or something? I think I changed it to a 7. Yeah, and he gave it an 8. Just literally because it's an Egyptian-only Amonkhet thing. I'm actually surprised they got a 5 on Amonkhet, but I mean, the Eternalize is specific to the storyline, so that's probably a 9. I mean, what, Bolas is going to come back and need an exact same army and do it the exact same way? I doubt it. Next up, boy, I forgot there was this many damn mechanics. Jeez. Exert. Okay, I hated that one. I mean, it was interesting, but functionally in the cards that went on, I hated it. I guess the mechanic I didn't have a huge issue with, but the cards I had a huge issue with. I already know absolutely everything he's going to say about this. Let me just come up with a number. I'm going to say probably a 5, because like it is kind of wide open. Popularity liked. Really? It was liked by more experienced players. It fared a bit poorer overall. There you go. That's a good way to put it. I think this boils down to the fact that the mechanic is a bit spiky, requiring you to know when it's the right time to use it. That's not spiky at all. I don't know why I even said that. Design space, medium. It used the effect as an attack trigger, while Hour of Devastation experimented with using it as an activation cost. Oh yeah, that's right. Each only goes on creatures and comes with its own limitations. I think the Hour of Devastation version of it was way better. It's a tap ability that was so powerful that you didn't even untap the next turn. That was kind of cool. I like that. But then you could also do it in combat, I think, too? Or no, you couldn't. I don't remember. I don't think you could. Whatever. So even with all those restrictions, there's still a relatively large amount of design space. So versatility, flexible. Amonkhet did have some synergies with Exert, but nobody played them, is what he should have said. The mechanic can just work. It's just, now you're making it bigger, and it does a big thing, and it blasts some fire at someone, and then you can't use it next turn. I mean, it's literally Hyper Beam from Pokemon Go. You use it, and then, you can't do anything next turn because it's too powerful. I could name 50 other games that have a mechanic like this. You know what? Screw it. I'm downgrading it to 4. It's so basic and so common, there's no way they're giving it a 5. Development neutral. The attack trigger version of Exert tends to speed up the environment, so play design has to watch out for that. Yeah, as if they ever care if standard gets too fast. Hello, Red Rush for the last year and a half. It's also hard and constructed to have a creature mechanic that doesn't work for a turn. Yeah, because you have to remember it, you have to track it, and then they had to do those little punch-out things. That was kind of annoying. Oh, well, that's under playability, too, by the way. So, yeah, playability affected, yes. When we have to make a play aid to remind you that you've used an ability, that's a sign that there's a memory issue. Was that directed at the players? Is that an insult at some of the older players there, Marky Mark? And the Storm Scale rating, boom, nailed it, it's a 4. Hell yeah. I am so far inside Mark Rosewater's head, he's going to have to use a saw to get me out. So yeah, he thinks we'll see it again. I think so too. I think it's interesting because it's ballsy, it's daring, it takes skill, it's decision based. Yeah, I think they will. Oh god, they're gonna call this a mechanic? Punch out counters. So literally the perforated card with the bricks on it, little cardboard bricks that people just absolutely memed to death. And if your local gaming store at the pre-release didn't have everybody building little pyramids out of them between turns, then I just don't even know who you people are. I am gonna give this bare minimum an 8, if not a 9. This has got to be expensive. It was stupid. They were impossible to store. They didn't fit in a deck box. They're just a sign that the mechanic was too impossible to remember. Hell, I'm giving it a 10. I know it's not a 10, but I'm giving it a 10. Okay, that's what I'm giving it. Realistically, I think I'll say an 8. Popularity popular. No, it wasn't. Nobody used these. Oh my god, he literally says this is another one I'm guessing a bit on, as this isn't something we specifically asked players about. Nobody used these. If you want to know if you should do it again, maybe ask players about it. What the hell? Based on the responses I got through social media, opinions seem generally positive. What kind of dumbass little ass kissers do you have? Actually, I could answer that by myself. I have seen it firsthand. So the design space is large, duh. I mean, you can't even measure it that way. I don't even know why they consider this a mechanic. It's more of an object. Versatility, it's flexible and rigid. Imagine that. Development, not problematic. Really. Punch-out components tend to help with mechanics with memory and marking issues. In general, that makes play design easier, blah, 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 okay, whatever. Yeah, but you can use, like, anything. You can use those little glass trackers. You can use dice. I mean, you can use coins, like... Why is this even... It's not a mechanic. It's literally a physical object. It's a product. Why is this on the list? Nobody used the damn bricks. They just used D6s, for God's sake. Mark, come on, get a clue. I mean, the -1s were nice, but he better not rate it too high because of that, or I mean low. Playability. Playability affected, requiring an extra component that's impossible to transport or store, I'm just adding that one, is what Punch-Out technology is all about. So obviously it requires using something other than the cards. Well... so did the mechanics. So is that even a fair way to assess it? This whole thing's a complete just craptastic crap storm, so let's just cut to it. What is it? Oh my god, it's a 3. Kiss my ass, Mark. Oh, I'm reading this summary. I gotta know how he justifies this. I am very bullish on Punch-Out technology. That's right, guys. It's technology from 1930. As the person responsible for mapping out the future of potential design space, for now, hopefully the stockholders at Hasbro will fire you at some point. I see this as something that has the ability to shift what Magic is capable of. It's possible one day this will drop down to a 2 and will be an ongoing deciduous part of Magic's design. Oh my god, I hope not. If they do, like, build your own 3-dimensional tokens, like the frickin' Thopter thing at the pre-release, I will just light every single one on fire that anybody brings into play. I'll just get out a lighter and just flame on. I'm going to ignore the Punch-Out cards, and I'm going to continue to use candy, so I have an excuse to eat candy, okay? Next up, Afflict, or as I like to call it, Semi-Trample. Okay, this is probably like a 3, because it's one of those half mechanics, you know? They've had, like, conditional double strike, where it's only double strike if it hits the player, not if it hits the creature. They've had, well, this is conditional trample. They've had conditional protection, conditional hexproof. And they're all watered-down versions of mechanics that already exist and are arguably way the hell too powerful. So I really think we're going to see Afflict again. I think it was pretty cool. It was actually kind of annoying, a little bit OP in some cases, but that's good. That just means it's playable, I guess. I mean, just because they went overboard on it with a couple cards, like Amit, doesn't mean that it's a bad mechanic. Yeah, I'm settling in at 3. Alright, so the popularity was liked. The mechanic got a bit of a meh response from players. That's because it's not full-blown trample. They didn't hate it, but they didn't love it either. Then why did you rate it liked instead of neutral? Okay, whatever. Design space, small. This is one of the mechanics we thought would have a lot of design space when we first created it, but as we made cards, we quickly learned that it had a lot more restrictions than we first thought. The versatility was neutral. Afflict tends to want to be in a more aggressive set where creatures are more likely to be attacking. Well, what deck has creatures that sit around? I mean, that's not the norm at all. So that's weird. The development was neutral in small doses. Play design had no issues with Afflict, but it does limit how much we can use the mechanic in any one set. Yeah, if you do synergy with it, otherwise it's fine by itself. Well, I mean, you don't want to just make it where blocking is irrelevant. I mean, so there's that. It also causes us to pull back on burn spells and other direct damage. That's true, because if you have Afflict mixed with direct damage, red gets out of control. But I have a solution for that. Call me crazy. Don't put Afflict on red. Oh, wow, I must be some kind of card design genius to figure that one out. And for playability was not affected. It's just you block or you don't. Simple. So the rating was a 7? What is wrong with you, Mark? I swear. Seriously. Oh, boo-hoo, we couldn't put it on enough cards and nobody used the synergy. They just used the effect by itself. Who cares? Then design it that way. Just give up on the synergy. My god. Why is this a 7? You're just going to have to make an effect called Semi-Trample and just do that then. When we designed Afflict, the idea was to make a throw-forward mechanic for War of the Spark. Oh, that's weird that they would plan that far. But the way it played out and the way War of the Spark design worked, which now it's all just planeswalkers and filler jank probably, it didn't end up being a good fit. So actually that makes sense because its bolus is in that one. I just got that. Anyway, so the most obvious place where its return isn't going to happen, that leaves... So he drove up the number because it didn't fit in the one they wanted to fit it into. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's not even how the storm scale works. So that leaves its future a bit up in the air. It's a simple enough mechanic, but has enough strikes against it that I only see its return coming if it's the perfect solution to a future design problem. Unlike Exert, I don't see this as nearly as likely. Great, so now we're going to have all or nothing, trample or don't. Great, thanks. And I will say, okay, not every Afflict was semi-trample. Some of them were like, if it's blocked, draw a card or something, or if it's blocked, mill them or whatever. So maybe they should just make a new keyword that's in its place that's just semi-trample. Maybe call it Mega Trample to trigger that SJW bitch that works at Wizards. Yeah, I know, I might have to be more specific. Next up, Eternalize. I mean, literally because it's just Space Egypt, aka Amonkhet, and it's just the Bolas storyline, that has to put it at like a 9. Other than that, I loved it, so I don't know what he's going to do with this. So popularity, unliked. Dude, Adorned Pouncer was the promo. Like, I know Wizards chose that, but still. Like, then you got Champion of Wits, people didn't play a lot of Eternalize, but the ones they played, people freaking loved it. It played around control, but only in a stretch, because Eternalize costs, like, basically 5 and up. It was absolutely fantastic, just like Aftermath, and it worked just like Aftermath. So he probably gave it a 20 on the Storm scale. What the hell? He says Eternalize was designed as an Embalm twist to capture Bolus's Eternals, so it's interesting to see the huge difference between Embalm and Eternalize. I guess because Embalm was cheaper, it's more playable, but people liked it. I don't get this. Adorn Pouncer was insane. I'm not sure if players disliked Eternalize in a vacuum or disliked it in contrast to Embalm. That's a good point, but people liked it. I guess he's just, by like, he means it didn't show up in a lot of Tier 1 decks, but people did like it. Anyway, design space small, yeah, it only turns into a 4/4, and then, yeah, blah, 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 okay, whatever. Versatility rigid, because it's handcrafted to fit in just Hour of Devastation. It's not the kind of thing you can just pop in any set. That's true. Development neutral, they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get Eternalized to work. It was doable, but only because there was a small number of Eternalized creatures, and they were in higher rarities. True. It is a little OP in draft and stuff. Then we got playability. Playability was affected because you had to, reuse it, and then there was the token, and yeah, whatever. He gave it an 8. Okay, I don't remember what I guessed. I think I said 9, so pretty much 8, 9, and 10 are the exact same thing, by the way, if you read the descriptions. Yeah, and he says it was a narrow answer to a story need, and I guess he thinks people didn't like it. So, thank God that was the last one. Okay, that took way longer than I thought. So that is every single one analyzed. What do you think? What was your favorite? Do you think he misrated them? Are there some you wish would come back because you love them? I know since people are going to ask, the number one mechanic I want back more than anything else is Devotion. Thank God Devotion is a 4 on the Storm scale. I think it used to be higher, but I'm not sure about that. The one I really don't want to come back is probably Undying, where it just directly, not even just you can bring it back from the graveyard under some circumstances, or at the end step it comes back from the graveyard. No, you kill it, and it immediately comes back into play with a +1/+1. Now there's a virtually identical mechanic called Persist, where it immediately comes back into play with a -1/-1 counter on it, which makes a hell of a lot more sense than, I use one of my valuable limited supply kill spells to kill this thing, and look, I just made it stronger. So you need 2 kill spells to take it down under any circumstances. Persist is like, okay, you've basically reduced my kill spell into a Wither 1. Cool, at least it's smaller and maybe I can block it in combat now. Maybe it became irrelevant in combat now. And unfortunately, Undying is a 5 on the Storm scale, and what the hell, I'll look up Persist right now. Let's see, Persist is a 6 for some reason. I have no idea why that would possibly be the case. None. My guess is because you can infinitely loop it, and he's literally referencing the Kitchen Finks deck. If it has a -1 counter on it, all you have to do is put a +1 counter on it, and if it dies again, it comes back again. Now with a +1 counter on it, that's a lot harder to get rid of because you'd have to drop a -1 counter on it, but still, Undying, I hate it. Those creatures are so stupidly annoying. Okay, pretend Rekindling Phoenix came back after dying with a +1/+1 counter on it. I guess, okay, it would only happen once, so technically the card's still worse as it sits, but you blow it away and then, now it's a 5/5. I mean, a 5/4. And my number one pick would actually probably just be Storm or Dredge. Duh, but I wanted to pick one that, might come back that I really don't want to come back. Artifact lands are a 10 and they can go straight back to hell. Anti is a 10. Yep, I don't want Anti. But like I said, I wanted to pick one that's not completely astronomically impossible. By the way, Cypher is a 9. Why? You know what? Look up the Storm scale for yourself. I think you guys would be surprised at how clueless Mark Rosewater really is. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to watch the Mythic Invitational. It's definitely not people just exploiting a shuffler, we'll say flaw, glitch, whatever, purposeful design error, and a bunch of hand-picked SJW liberal douchebags, some of which turned out to basically be Nazis. She literally said, gather up all the gay people and execute them. That's legit Nazi shit. Well, then she pulled the Kevin Spacey defense, and she's like, yeah, but I'm gay, though. To which the entire community said, yeah, but you're a terrible person, though. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning that absolute shit show is because it's powered by Omen by HP. Don't buy anything from HP. They're the least reliable brand of literally anything that isn't commercial gear. They make the worst, least reliable printers with the highest total cost of ownership. They make the worst laptops in the world by far. Last I saw, a 29% failure rate in the 3rd year. And let's see, desktops, absolute garbage. They've been known to catch on fire. Not as much as Acer's, but still. And even their own CEO came out and said, we're getting absolutely killed by warranty claim costs and expenses. And then the board yelled at her. Now, believe it or not, Omen computers are actually not that bad for HPs, but they're still shit. I mean, just build your own computer. My God. They almost couldn't have found a worse sponsor. I mean, plugging something that is knowingly complete ass is pretty low. This must have been like the 57th company they called. I mean, like Gatorade, Monster, like anything, a chair maker, a mouse maker, a monitor company, even just like an insurance company, Pepsi. Really? You had to go with HP and then specifically Omen? Wow, I wonder if they gave them such a ridiculously good deal that they couldn't turn it down, and they did it to just make themselves look more prestigious. Like, look, we have a sponsor. Some people actually do that. They pretend to have a sponsor. I don't know if this was like anything from like esports to streamers to like makeup people. They pretend to be sponsored by the company to make it look like they're more popular than they are. And I think that's what they're going with this ridiculous Mythic Invitational. So that was the second announcement that came out today. Absolutely hilarious. Do not buy HP trash. Their entire company, their support, their reliability, their hardware, everything's garbage. And don't watch this absolute disaster of an unfair rigged pile of garbage called the Mythic Invitational. The event has officially been literally unsponsored by Desolator Magic. Just kidding. Well, kind of. I mean, unofficially reverse backwards turbo unsponsored. That's a thing. Anyway, I'll see you guys next video.